Welcome back. Well, tonight, a chat about the hunt for the Holy Grail. Best-selling author Nelson DeMille is back in the News 12 studio. He's here to talk about his latest book, The Quest, which is available online and in stores right now. Welcome, Mr. DeMille. We appreciate you taking the time, as always, friend of News 12. Before we get into the book, I have to ask you about this.
Yeah.
Tom Clancy just died. Give us your perspective as one of his fellow literary colleagues, his impact on that.
Yeah, and it was kind of a shock. I heard it. I just stepped off a plane from Nashville on my book tour, and I got a text. I got several texts. Tom was, I didn't know him well, but he kind of invented the techno thriller. We all read techno thrillers now, or those of us who can read techno thrillers read them. This man kind of invented it. I mean, he wrote this book as a novice, couldn't get it published, went to Naval Institute Press, who never published, I think, a novel in the whole history of the Naval Institute Press. Went out there and became this huge bestseller. He tapped into this market of people, mostly male readers, but also female readers, who just love the idea that there are good guys out there protecting us, and they're all technically advanced. And of course, he was, to some extent, a product of the Cold War. We were all afraid of the Russians, and this man showed us that we don't have to be afraid of anybody, that we're the best. So I think he tapped into that, and that's probably one of the reasons for his success. And
a lot of big movies came out of those books, too.
Yeah, really.
All right, well, let's get into your book, The Quest. This is the search for the Holy Grail.
Right.
Give us a tease. What are we going to see in this book?
Well, I call it the Da Vinci Code meets Indiana Jones. And it's a lot of action and adventure, but it's also a good love story. It's set in the jungles of Ethiopia in 1975. In 75, there was a Marxist revolution that toppled Haile Selassie, who was the emperor. Selassie was known as the Lion of Judah, the King of Kings. He was a direct descendant of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. So this was a 3,000-year-old dynasty that all of a sudden came to an end. This is the history part of it. When I was writing this book, actually I wrote it in 74, 75, these events were ongoing. And I found it fascinating. This dynasty had come to an end. And Ethiopia is kind of an isolated civilization, and it's a very biblical land. It's supposed to be where the Ark of the Covenant came to rest, and is there. And also, there's some speculation that the Holy Grail, if the Holy Grail existed, was in Ethiopia. So against that background, I said an adventure story and a little bit of a love story.
And you call it Da Vinci Code meets Indiana Jones.
Right.
I mean, the search for the Holy Grail, that's been done over and over. And is it hard to come back and readdress an issue that's really been written about a lot?
That's a good question. It's been done. I mean, even Monty Python did it.
Right.
Right. But it's been done it's been done at least since the Dark Ages. The Arthurian legends, King Arthur and the Round Table, and Lord Tennyson and Mallory, The Death of Arthur. This thing has been done, but it seems to be every generation, is just fascinated by it. It's a timeless story in many ways. When I wrote it in 74, a lot of the modern stuff about the Holy Grail hadn't been done. That's why I thought the story was good enough to retell. And this is a little bit different twist in that it's set in Ethiopia, because I had done some research, and it said, the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant are in Ethiopia.
Right. So let's talk about some of your other books that you've written in the past. One of them, big one, Plum Island.
Right.
In the news right now. Let me just get your take as an author that's written about Plum Island, written about the lab right there. It was, I mean, the island itself was almost a character in that book.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Donald Trump taking Plum Island over and turning it into a golf resort?
I think it's time to close the facility. This facility is a little bit scary. And when I was writing about Plum Island, it wasn't under Homeland Security. It was under the Department of Agriculture, and it was really vulnerable. And this is like the equivalent of a nuclear, reactor. I mean, there's all these, pathogens there. I think it's good that they're going to move it. The government eventually, when they find the money, is going to move it to Kansas. As far as Donald Trump, I mean. As long as it's not developed, I think it's beautiful. I've been on the island, and they're very nice. The Department of Agriculture gave me a tour. It's this pristine island. It hasn't been touched except for the laboratory in probably 200 years. And it needs, it needs to be open to the public in one way or the other. Okay, so The Quest is going to open on the New York Times bestseller list, number 2. Number 2, yeah.
On Sunday. So it's already going up there. Is this is number 16 for you?
17, I believe.
17.
Yeah, I lost count.
So, let me ask you about, as a writer who, many of your characters go through different books. Paul Brenner, John Sutter. I mean, they're characters that revisit different stories. do they become like friends and family? I mean, how close do you get to these characters?
Not very close.
Not close at all?
No. I try to keep my distance. You know, every novelist that I've ever spoken to who creates a continuing character gets a little tired of the character. We shouldn't say that, but we get tired of it. I mean, Conan Doyle killed Sherlock Holmes for a reason. He was just tired of the man, but he had to bring him back by popular demand. I look at it as the readers love these continuing characters. I think for an author, it's not as much of a challenge, but you know, we do it because we do it for the readers. It's not easier to write a continuing character. It's actually more difficult because you have to make sure that you're consistent, that the character hasn't changed his personality from book to book.
And real quick, I have to ask you this. You've had 2 books turned into movies, General's Daughters,
right.
John Travolta played in it, Word of Honor, Don Johnson was in it. Right. Anything in the works?
Yeah, and in fact, I just heard today, Sony Studios, Sony TV is going to make Plum Island into what they call a limited series, 6 one-part segments, Aaron Eckhart starring, and Mason Neufeld producing, who was the man who produced The General's Daughter. So that was good news. I got off the plane. I got bad news about Tom Clancy, and I got good news about Plum Island.
And you're going to have good news coming out Sunday, #2 right. in the New York Times bestseller list. The Quest, Nelson DeMille, appreciate you taking the time and talking
Thank
with
you,
us.
Stone.
All right, if you'd like to meet Nelson DeMille and get your book signed, there are 4 events coming up in the next couple of months. This Sunday, he'll be at the West Hampton Free Library. That one starts at 3. On the 10th, Mr. DeMille will be at Forest Books in Locust Valley. And then November 7th, there's an event at Old Westbury Gardens. Then, of course, on the 18th of November, a signing at the Port Washington Public Library. And all of this information, as everything else, is on our homepage, should be yours as well, news12.com, under numbers and links. We'll be right back.